He said that there was a feeling he got from Parker and Zuckerberg that they were just going to take over the world. So because of that feeling, he thought to himself, I'm a gambler. And he told Parker and Zuckerberg that he didn't really give a shit about their idea or their company, but he wanted to invest in them. And so he had a feeling that they would make whatever they put out work. If you fast forward 4 years later, Choe was getting yelled at by his family member for never responding to their Facebook messages. He told them over and over again that he wasn't on Facebook and he didn't care about it. They looked into it deeper and they found out that somebody created a fake profile under David's identity. Because, again, David knew the founders of Facebook. He called up Parker and asked him to have that fake sign shut down and then turned it over to David. When David started playing on Facebook, he realized that it actually was pretty cool. So while they were on the phone doing that, Parker asked Choe if he ever checked out the value of his stock, which, of course, he hadn't. But he did with the final urging of Parker, and then he realized that suddenly he was worth $1 million. And he thought to himself, well, shit, I'm a millionaire. And here's the interesting thing. At that time, he was already making over $1 million a year gambling with his system. And also at that exact same time, he had just done his really big art show in London and had sold over $1 million of his artwork. So he was already a multi-millionaire in there, and seeing that in another source he didn't think about, he thought was pretty cool. Because he really didn't care about the money at that time, he was offered a couple of different chances to cash out by some investment firms, but him being a gambler was like, well, I don't think I'm going to sell it, and Parker actually urged him not to sell it. So he decided just to hold on, not think about it, and wait until Facebook's IPO. The IPO comes around, and he suddenly realizes, though, that his stock, from the $60,000 worth of work that he did years ago, was suddenly worth over $200 million. And he freaked out. He liked the fact that, he was living a great life. He was enjoying some anonymity, enjoying his life. And suddenly he was really scared that his newfound wealth, particularly with a company as public as Facebook was, that suddenly then it was just going to change everything. He hoped, honestly, that nobody really knew who he was and they would be fine, until the next day the New York Times called him and said, we know who you are, we know what you're worth, and we're going to create a story about you. He begged and pleaded with New York Times to not run any kind of story, and basically he thought they agreed to just not run it and leave him alone, but they lied. And the next day he was on the cover of the New York Times as Facebook's unknown millionaire. At this point in the story is where a lot of things take a weird turn, because I, like many people, would assume, that'd be amazing. Suddenly now you've got more money than you can probably spend in a lifetime, money to do things, something that you always talk about and think about and joke about, but doesn't actually happen. In this case with Choe, it did happen, and he talks about this is the moment where his life was ruined, which was very different from what the interviewer and the organizer of the event thought was going to happen. If you want to see what David Choe really sounds like, particularly when he talks about this, there's a great Barbara Walters interview that she did with him about this. And he has a very similar frame of mind and tone of voice than when he spoke live about this. But basically, people he never knew from before came out of the woodwork and kept on asking him for money. He could no longer trust people. Because of all that, all of his now access to new funds, he got addicted to a couple of different things, and basically now talks about how much that the Facebook IPO and that New York Times article has just ruined his life. But this brings up the idea of some takeaways that we can learn from David Choe and himself. So David Choe's story seems to be, and could be, interpreted in one way or the other, as just unadulterated luck. And there is no doubt that he was lucky in a certain way. It was very fortuitous of him to come across Sean Parker, and for Sean Parker to be excited about his work, and for him to, take the risk on the Facebook stock, even though he didn't care about that was. But let's get rid of luck in this instance and say that he was at the right place at the right time, which ultimately is where a lot of really good things happen. But first and foremost, okay, one important thing to take a look at is his art career took off once he realized his self-worth and valued his work. As I mentioned before earlier, he was a struggling artist and had to develop a system. His system was to create some money through, well, in his instance, was gambling, but he figured out a way to leave the table ahead. When he was doing that, it made him feel better about himself and made him value his artwork more, which led to a lot more opportunities. So there are always things that we do subconsciously that are holding us back by not valuing ourselves, not valuing our businesses or relationships, whatever they are. But by creating systems and by creating ways, small incremental ways where we can find greater value in ourselves and what we're doing, it will allow us to then raise that value and charge more what we're worth. And this is what David Choe did. The more self-confidence he got, the more he charged more of what he was worth, and bigger opportunities came his way. Something we can take away of this, trusting your intuition and gut. He took some risks. I mean, obviously, he was a bit of a gambler, and we saw that from his obviously going to Vegas and gambling. But he took a risk at Facebook and working with them. Of course, it was incredibly lucky that the company he ended up working with and did a mural for was Facebook in its infancy stages. But think about this. At that time, he was offered $60,000, and he could have very easily taken the money and walked away. But he didn't. He didn't even believe in the concept that they were doing. He thought Facebook was a giant waste of time for college students. But he saw something in Zuckerberg and Parker that made him believe enough to think that they would succeed. And he trusted that intuition, and he trusted his gut, and he just let it ride. He did this because, of course, he had self-confidence in himself. I'm just curious to think that, of course it's easy to say this now because we all are familiar with Facebook, but, in 2005 when this was happening and Facebook wasn't even really a thing, I remember when Facebook came out and I was in college, would, you have made the same decision back then or just taken the money? So something to think about. The third thing to look at David Choe's story is the idea behind money. So many people, and myself included, can think that sometimes that just the money itself will solve your problem. That whatever it is, suddenly, if there's just an influx of cash or a windfall, that suddenly whatever the problems on your life will go away. And that is simply not the case. More money will actually magnify your problems. Look at where you are in your own life right now and the things that you're working on. Maybe it's better to spend more time trying to solve some of your own issues and work on your own problems first before focusing on getting some more success. Because as we clearly see in this one, whatever things that David was struggling with back when he was an artist, a starving artist, those things just got more and more magnified when suddenly this giant windfall happened. And again, I encourage everyone to look at the Barbara Walters interview because it really does paint a strong picture of just how unhappy he is at this moment. Because again, him on stage in front of the audience that was there has a very similar feeling to the interview that happened with Barbara Walters. So there I give you. That is the things I've learned from David Choe, who again, absolutely fascinating, and his story of what he's done is definitely one that is truly monumental and amazing. Because, think about this. How many people come across an opportunity to do what they do and to do what they love, and just so happen to stumble across one of the biggest, upcoming tech companies in their infancy, paint the murals, and then get this huge windfall from that. So again, I'll be doing some more of these. Please let me know if there are other artists you're interested in hearing about. There's a lot that I'm researching, either through reading their biographies or just of my own interviews, as well as listening to other people's interviews of them. And as those come out, I will be releasing that, as well as some more tips to strategies that I have been working on and going to be releasing in the book. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm easy to find. Also, if you are working on projects that you need a second opinion on, I'd be happy to help out. That's Yuri at advanceyourart.com. Thank you again for listening in today, and I hope everyone has a wonderful, warm day. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Advance Your Art podcast. If you like this episode, please go into iTunes and give us a 5-star rating. And while you're there, hit the subscribe button so that every single time I release a new episode, it will go directly to you without even thinking about it. If you're interested in hearing older episodes, please go to advanceyourart.com where you can find the catalog of everything I've done so far, as well as contact information and projects I'm working on. Thank you again, and have a great day.